Hi, I'm Sydney,
And I'm Hannah.
and this is our project on bioelectromagnetism.
This is Hannah. Hannah is full of neurons. They are located in her brain and spinal cord. These neurons transmit information through her body to other cells in order to tell her body what to do. Now, let's look at the structure of one of these neurons. A neuron is made up of dendrites, an axon, synapses, which all form the cell body, which encloses the nucleus. The dendrites receive signals from other neurons. The axon transmits action potentials to the synapses, which in turn release neurotransmitters. So how exactly do these signals work? Well, let's imagine Hannah's mom. Hannah's mom tells Hannah when to do things. Things like brush your teeth, go to bed, and do more homework. Similarly, neurons tell muscles and other cells what to do and when to do it. Both Hannah's mom and neurons react to outside stimulus. Hannah's mom reacts to things like what time it is and bad grades. Neurons react to chemical signals from other cells and drugs. This is a cell membrane of an axon. It is made of phospholipids. The bilayer these phospholipids form is a good insulator because of the hydrophobic tails pictured in green. These are the protein ion channels. First is the sodium-potassium pump. Second, the potassium ion channel. And third, the sodium ion channel. There are other ion channels not listed that contribute to the flow of chloride ions and other ions classified as leakage. The sodium-potassium pump moves 3 sodium ions out of the cell while moving 2 potassium ions into the cell. This creates a more positive solution on the outside of the cell than the inside. This makes a membrane potential which at rest has a magnitude of 70 millivolts. The insulating membrane surrounded by the conducting ion solutions creates a capacitor which stores energy. The capacitor and the ion channels are connected in a resistor-capacitor circuit. The ion channels act as wires allowing the current of ions to flow through the cell membrane and also have their own resistance based on the diameter and length of the channel. The sodium-potassium pump also acts as a battery by using potential energy from ATP to charge the capacitor.
This is what the membrane looks like as only a circuit. As you can see, it's a bunch of channels connected in parallel. Measurements of the ions are taken separately. For example, current is measured for sodium, potassium, chloride, and all other ions fall under the leak category. Each category also has its own conductance, shown by G. Conductance is the reciprocal of resistance. E represents the equilibrium potential for each ion. The capacitor is what allows the circuit to continue working even after the sodium-potassium pump has been turned off. Ohm's law can be used to describe this circuit. The voltage across the membrane is subtracted by the equilibrium potential for each ion, and then multiplied by the conductance for that ion to get the current for each ion. The derivative of the capacitance is equal to the current that flows through the membrane. An action potential is not sent directly down the axon as an electrical impulse. It is sent because the ion channels also act as switches. The channels open or close depending on the voltage across the membrane. At the beginning of an action potential, a neuron alters the voltage across the membrane to above threshold, causing the sodium ion channels to open. The new diffusion of sodium ions causes a change in the voltage that opens the potassium ions and closes other sodium channels around it. The new diffusion of potassium then changes the voltage back, and the potassium ion channels close again. This part of the axon goes back to resting potential. To illustrate how the channels acting as switches make the action potential move down the axon, here's the parallel circuit again. The blue represents the channels acting as switches. In this case, an open ion channel represents a closed switch because it allows a current through. The switches before an action potential are all open. To start an action potential, the switches at the beginning of the axon are closed. Using the concepts in the previous drawing, the closed switches close more switches further along the axon. The switches then open, disconnecting the previous paths for current. This pushes the action potential down the axon and to the synapse.
Once the action potential reaches the synapse, it triggers the calcium ion channel to open up, which allows the flow of calcium ions into the cell. These calcium ions bind with the vesicle that contains neurotransmitters. This binding causes the vesicle to fuse with the cell membrane, releasing the neurotransmitters out into the surroundings of the cell.
IBM is working on a computer chip inspired by the way neurons send and receive signals. Instead of using binary, neurons communicate in spikes, action potentials, that IBM wants to replicate. This is because they contain more information than binary does. Binary is only on or off. The frequency and length of an action potential also carries information. To mimic neuron structure, IBM is using 4,000 cores containing neuron bodies that line one side of the core, each connected to a dendrite and through a buffer to an axon. This significantly blurs the line between man and machine, and another group of researchers has taken this a step further and made artificial neurons with tiny pumps for ions that are actually able to communicate with human cells. They are currently the size of a fingertip and are made of polymers. This could mean a fix for brain damage. Or we could change the neural paths in our brain so we have better processing. I mean, we are all made of circuits. We could act like terrifying science fiction robots and upgrade ourselves. Or we could make Frankenstein. An artificial brain connecting 2.3 million of these neurons has been created. The results of its tests for recognition of stimulus, memory, and intelligence didn't have good enough results for the book version of Frankenstein, but we could probably make the movie version. But we should probably just stick to healing brain damage.